Welcome, everybody. This is host Jackson Moore, and this is Conscious Human Evolution podcast and show. Today, I have with me.
I'm Dr. Kiza Shine, and this is a continuation of our last podcast about souls, entities, and personalities. And last time we were talking about the reincarnational aspect of the soul, which is where we're going to pick up today. And Jackson, you want to take us away?
Sure. So, in the last podcast, we were talking about souls, entities, personalities, and really kind of the connection, if you will, between the souls, the personalities, the entities, the oversoul, as we would think of it, and then multidimensional conscious collective. So, we've talked a little bit about angels and various forms of souls and entities that are focused on three-dimensional reality that incarnate into the human experience and the universe that we know. So, one thing that we will cover here in this one, we're going to talk a little bit about the multidimensional aspects of the soul, where the soul is outside of time and space, but then, as we talked about in the other podcast, it projects a portion of itself into the human body, which then gives you the spark of life. Now, since I've been dead, I will tell you that when you're focused outside of the human body, it is lifeless, right? So that's what causes life, brings life to the human body. That's what starts the beat of the heart, a gestalt consciousness between the mother and the soul that is incarnating into the baby. But when that soul chooses to leave the focus of itself through the human body, that's when physical death occurs, right? So that may be natural causes or a forced cause, but it's certainly that's when the soul loses its focus from within the physical self. So in reincarnation, the way that Seth talks about it is we as humans think of reincarnation as a linear occurring lifetime that occurs one after the other. They are not. Because there is no space and there is no time, then all of these reincarnational lives that we think are linear are literally occurring simultaneous with this one. And that is very, very important. Now, the soul has no sex, as we've talked about in a previous podcast, that it can incarnate as both a male or a female. And there's always a balance between those. Now, there may be some souls that choose to incarnate many more times, like Seth says from my particular soul and instance, that I've incarnated in many more lifetimes as a male than a female. Some are many more lifetimes as a female because they like that role in advancing the female part of our culture and our society and that sort of thing. So you can make your choices before you incarnate, and you can incarnate as either one of those. Excuse me. And then as you incarnate into one of these particular bodies, then you develop a personality. So, for example, we got the Jackson personality for this lifetime. Kiza would be another personality. Now, if you're incarnated into another dimension of experience that we would think of as a reincarnational lifetime, then you're going to be developing as another personality. So, my soul could be right now a female that's 4 years old in another lifetime. Now, most people, there's millions of people all over the world that'll tell you they have either seen in a dream or a daydream or a vision, they've seen a reincarnational life. They've seen themselves in what we call past lives, right? So past lives is very applicable, and I think it's kind of a little bit cliche in our society, almost a little dogma, if you will, within the spiritual realm and spiritual folks. And that, again, we think of linear reality where one lifetime occurs before or after the other. Yes,
Do you think they use that phrase because it's easier for the human brain to conceptualize what you're
I
talking
think it
about?
is. I think it is. And because most people do not as yet understand the true nature of time and space being a phenomenon, and the fact that physical reality is literally just an illusion of the five human senses, that the fact that our five human senses are what paints the picture of three-dimensional reality. Because when you die, you can change your focus, you can look at it like an illusion, but you realize that it's just an illusion. And so I think a lot of people view reincarnational lifetimes as being linear because they do not understand the nature of time and phenomenon of time and space. And they don't believe that the future has already happened, when in fact, the future has happened just as much as the past did. But see, the human brain has a memory. And so as you go from now moment to now moment and it changes ever so slightly to the billionth of a little fraction, our human senses cannot change or cannot detect the change between the now moments when it's shifting and evolving. And so we perceive time as linear when in fact it's simultaneous. And so the the applicability there is that most people do not perceive future lifetimes because they do not believe the future has existed. Now, when you really study your spiritual stuff and you understand the true nature of time and space as being a phenomenon, then you will open up the probability that you can perceive the future. So, for example, I have um, myself seen many past lives. I've seen lives where I was a knight and I was left-handed. I drew a sword this way with my left hand, and in this lifetime, I'm right-handed. I was a male, and I was riding on a horse, and I remember that lifetime very, very well. I got shot with a crossbow in my left shoulder. I remember having somebody pull the bolt out of me in the castle and all of this other stuff that was going on. I've seen myself in other lifetimes in like the 1920s, I believe it was. And I do believe I had another lifetime in the Vietnam War, in the early stages of the Vietnam War, before I incarnated into this one as well, right? But you see those objects that are in that time period in history, and because of our history books, it tells us human history had these things, right? We were riding horses, we were in carriages or buggies or whatever it was. So within the linear context of human history, we paint that picture that, oh, that was a past life. And we think that it's happened and it's over with. And then this life is now another one that comes after that, when in fact that is literally happening simultaneous with this one. So I explained this to um, a woman that was in my lecture this past weekend. And so had a whole bunch of folks in the room, and this woman had a question. At the end, I took questions, and she said, I have this dream that keeps coming back. And she said, obviously, I'm female in this lifetime. And she said, but in that dream, I see myself and I'm a male. And I'm like in my mid 20s or whatever else. And so she was telling me about that. And she said, so why does this dream keep coming back? And I told her, I said, you are literally perceiving yourself. It is another portion of your soul that has projected a portion of itself as a male in another dimension of reality that you think of as a reincarnational life that is prior to this one. And I said, you don't see your future lifetimes because you don't believe the futures exist yet. It hasn't happened yet. When in fact, both the past and the future is a probable reality that may or may not come into focus. We only remember one linear past. There are many linear paths. It's just that our memory only remembers one line of them, right? And so I said, so that individual that you see in that dream, let's say his name is Rick, right? And he's in 1865 or whatever else. I said, when you meet him and you see yourself, she said, I see myself. I know it's me, but I'm a man. And so they meet each other in the dream state. And I said, so in that dream state, I said, what's your name, sweetie? And she said, Tina. I said, Tina, so in that dream state, you think that Rick in the 1800s, that you are the real person and that he is the dream. And Rick thinks that he is the real person and that you are the dream. So you are literally communicating with another portion of your soul interdimensionally through the connection of the soul outside of time and space. Your dreams are transcending space and time to perceive information from other lifetimes. Now, when you expand the soul, when you meditate, when you use your tools, when you rise in vibration and you come up with higher vibrations like this becomes natural. So, for somebody who's been doing this their whole life, like me, for decades, you become open where you can perceive those other lifetimes. And so, I explained it to another individual this way. It's kind of like channels, right? So you have on the TV, you've got channel 3, you've got channel 6, and you've got channel 9. Giza incarnated into this physical lifetime. She's on channel 9. Your 5 human senses only sense all of the data that is within channel 9. Within that frequency range, you are focused. But over here, you're incarnated, let's say, as Rick in 1854, and you're 19 years old. Rick is only focused on this range of frequencies. He's on channel 3. So just like a TV, if you're on channel 3, you don't see channel 9. If you're on channel 9, you don't see channel 3 or channel 6. So each one perceives its physical dimension of reality that is painted by the five human senses in that particular dimension. But they are all occurring simultaneously. So the applicability is that we have access eternally. Any one of portion of your soul will have access to all of this information multidimensionally, eternally, and all you have to do is learn to tap into it to draw from that knowledge,
What
that
a
experience.
beautiful explanation. And I think the human brain can conceptualize the TV channels. I think that's really fascinating. How do you have any advice on how people can tap in and tune into each of those channels at the same time?
Really, it's kind of as simple as starting point would be to pay attention to your dreams. Now, there's lots of books about dreams out there, and that talk about, the nature of the dreams. Now, some of them are not focused spiritually into that particular aspect or opening up that dimension. But certainly from a spiritual perspective, start paying attention to your dreams, the symbolism in them. And you could get a dream journal. You could set it next to your bed and have a pen. When you wake up first thing in the morning, you remember you're thinking about your dream and you can write down as much as you want. It's just like going to the gym. Anything you practice at, you're going to get better over time. It's just like learning to meditate or channel. So, that's one of those things where you can pay attention to it. The first step is becoming aware of it, then focusing on it to be able to develop it. So, what we're talking about here is energy. Everything is energy. Consciousness is energy. Energy is consciousness. So, it's a form of energy, hence the electromagnetic properties that attract other forms of consciousness, which forms atoms and molecules, which then brings in the law of attraction to be able to draw things into our life. Right. So we can tap into these multidimensionally in our other lifetimes and perceive some of the things that are in those lifetimes and even lifetimes that we didn't live. We can perceive what other people have perceived in their lifetimes. So, in other words, if you want to learn more information about the pyramid, you could set your intention. You could say before you go to bed at night, I want to learn more about the pyramids. I want to learn about how they were developed and I want to gain knowledge and stuff like that. And if you really put your intention in it and you practice at it, you can access that information via your dreams or in a deep meditative state, you could do so as well. And then eventually you could be open up the channel where you could potentially channel information from that dimensional reality that is existing, simultaneously with this one here. So there's many, many, many aspects with simultaneous incarnations. And so really in our future books, when Seth and I kind of go forward with some of this, one of our books in the future will be simultaneous existences of the multidimensional soul. And we will talk about the simultaneous existences and how to tap into them. Because the evolution of humanity is literally going there. So if we were to look at this as a phase type thing, like this is channel 3, this is one lifetime. This is channel 6, this is another. This is channel 9, this is another. When you develop your abilities to where myself and others are, I'm not the only one, there's many. When you develop your abilities, you will literally dissolve the wall that seems to separate you from other lifetimes. And when you dissolve that wall and that wall goes away, all of these individual portions of your own soul will have access to draw information from each other multidimensionally, which transcends time and space. And in so doing, it evolves the entity. Now, when you do that, you'll be using your clear abilities. You'll be communicating with other humans via telepathy,
Mhm.
and you'll be able to develop telekinesis, which is not necessarily a clear ability in the main set that most people think. But you'll be able to feel the feelings of a tree. You'll be able to feel the feelings of a dog or a horse. You'll be able to communicate with animals. I can do this. People on the earth can do this today. There are people that literally communicate with animals that can see through an animal's eyes. at 1,000 miles away. A woman can sit there and literally tell you what the dog is looking at. When the dog changes its focus, she can tell you what it's been looking at again over the telephone, and the person standing next to the dog can confirm it. She can literally merge her consciousness to view through another animal. When you do that, there's a level of compassion, there is a level of empathy, there is a level of innate understanding at the level of the soul, which connects us as humanity to nature. And then we understand we're not apart from nature. We are a part of nature, and nature is a part of us. Therefore, anything we ever desire, any health, love, money, relationships, whatever else, is literally where we are right now in the moment. And it's only our human brain and our rational mind that separates it from us.
I freaking love that. It almost feels like you can take a power cord that's attached to you and plug it into the wall and be totally tapped in, like
Yeah.
plugged into everything
Yeah.
and turned on,
Now
you know?
it's like anything else. This is practice, and this is a process.
Hmm.
So, as we've talked about in some of the other podcasts, that when you're born, you have a physical brain that is born only in this lifetime. That physical brain only sees what's in this lifetime. It doesn't see what's in the other lifetimes. So the whole time, all through your life, you're painting a picture of physical reality based on only what channel 3 can see, not what channel 6 and 9 can see, let alone multiple others, right? But when you tap into the soul and you tap into these abilities and you go within, you let go of physical reality and learn to meditate and tune that out and kind of just be. And you set your intentions, you direct your energy and everything else. You can dissolve the walls and tap into them, and you can see future lifetimes. Now, the good thing about seeing future lifetimes is they're infinite. So you can draw upon one that you want. So, do we have time that I could talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, a lot of people do not understand that the future is just a probable reality. So we could see, so for example, you do a visualization about something you want to happen in your life or whatever else. You're seeing a future probable reality. There's infinite numbers of those, right? There's infinite ways that that could happen. That could come to you and you want a new house. That could come to you in many, many different ways. But the higher your vibration and the more you're tapped in, tuned in, turned on, the more you have access to be able to draw that thing to you without having to fight for it. So there's multidimensional aspects where you can tap into that which you want in the future by doing visualization, by feeling like it's in your universe now. It's literally there. You might not see it with your five human senses, but it's like when you go to the grocery store, you don't see your house because it's back where it's sitting, but you know it's going to be there. To that level of belief, when you believe that that object is in your life, you include it in your consciousness and it must appear. Now, it might take time and space, and there may be other conditions that come into play, but that must be drawn into your life. It's likeness and that sort of thing. So the soul has the ability to create unlimited, and it has the ability to perceive that transcends all space and all time. Now, Seth says he has existed since before the earth was formed. Okay, what does that mean? That means he is outside of time and space. So for Seth, he can literally dictate a book in 1963 with Jane Roberts, that did the original Seth books, simultaneously be dictating a book with me in 2021 when we were, doing the nature of consciousness and putting the materials together for this, and literally be in 19 other dimensions. Now, he's told me he can have hundreds of thousands of connections simultaneously, not channeling like he channels with me, but connections, like he can influence people's thoughts and choices and guide them and that sort of thing,
Hmm.
right? You can have hundreds of thousands of these in this dimension and many others simultaneously and track them all lucidly in every single one of the dimensions and every single one of the connections. It's unlimited. And he has the ability to do that. There are no boundaries. So, one of his famous sayings is there are no boundaries, there are no separations of self or the soul. And so, what he means by that, there's no separations of the soul from yourself and other dimensions of reality or from anything else that can be perceived. It is just your rational mind that thinks you're separate from it. And when you overcome that rational mind, you have than what Yeshua said. I have overcome the earth. I have overcome the world. That's what he meant. I have overcome the physical environment, the physical world. Now I see things and I speak from the Christ consciousness within, the soul perspective. It's kind of interesting because we've had some of those conversations, and Yeshua was a master psychic medium, just like I am, just like many others are and stuff. When he says he went to the Father, he literally sat there and meditated and channeled, just as I channel with Seth and stuff. In fact, I've had the Christ consciousness that came through and said, we were the ones who spoke to Yeshua when he was in the garden. So we are what he called the Father. It's a conscious collective. You know what I mean? So that would be like the Christ entity. There's, again, many personalities that would have incarnated from that entity. So,
Right, right. That's so beautiful. I love how magical this all is. And as you were talking about time, space, reality, past lives, future lives, visualization, right? There is something really profound. You and I were having a conversation over dinner one time, and it was about manifesting, but it was almost like we were talking about going back in time. I'm going to say back in time because of my current brain, right? Back in time to a different
yes.
reality, creating, visualizing in that particular time. Let's say we're in the desert and I'm trying to create water to
Yep.
an oasis, right? It's like literally visualizing a lake and creating a stream to come down onto a property to build an oasis, right? In the desert. And it's like going back and visualizing yourself building the dam to produce the stream to come on down to today's world. And then you would have this beautiful pond, lake, oasis, whatever, that had a flow of water. And it's cool, that conversation that you and I had, that I have been practicing now to go back to create a new reality in the future in that past life. Is there another example?
You know what? We'll talk about that, and that's going to be a whole nother podcast. But there's some really, really seriously exciting things, and it's super cool even for me. And I've been doing this for decades, So, um, but the nature of time and space, and the nature of the now moment, the eternal now moment. And it's I'll just give you a brief example in the book, in the nature of consciousness. Seth gives an example, just kind of a little cookie that he puts out there. But again, it's another one of those things that people don't really understand, because if you did, it profoundly affects the way that you react and alter your life. And it's the fact that he says, with the simultaneous nature of existences and the fact that there's only ever one now moment, what everybody does not understand is that they think that events happen to them in life. Nothing ever happens to you. It only happens for you. And like he says in the book 1,000 times in his original Seth books and our books, you create your own reality. And what he means by that is you create your own perception of reality. So reality is one thing. Your five human senses will perceive it one way. And based upon your own beliefs, you create the perception of reality within the boundaries of you and the beliefs that you hold. So if you believe that something is not possible, like what you just talked about, if you believe that's not possible to go and pull things from the past or the future, to you, it will be impossible, because within the boundaries of your own beliefs, they act as literally like guardrails within which you create your own personal perception of reality. I see a different reality than you do. Now, some things we won't talk about on the podcast today, and I'm not making that public at the moment, but there's some things that I work on with Seth that are outside the perception of other people. They do not see what I see. They don't perceive what I perceive. Now, when I introduce them to it, they will. Then it will merge with their consciousness and become a part of physical reality. But literally, we could be looking at the same exact thing. That's why some people will give you 10 different stories about something that happened, right? Now, he gives an example in the book, and he talks about, for example, that you may have a family member that has road rage, and they get crazy when somebody cuts them off on the road, right? So this is a good example of a high charged event. When somebody's driving on the road, somebody else cuts them off, and they say, you know, some choice things. They give them the finger, they honk the horn, they scream at them, yell, and everything else. They think that they are reacting to an event that happened to them. And what literally happened was when they spiked the energy, and they did that negative, yelling, screaming, getting all outraged and everything else, and they get this road rage, right? That negative energy literally will go back in time and change somebody else's decision so that they turn left instead of turning right, which will bring them to cut you off on the road. So when you think you're reacting to something that happened to you are literally sending energy back in time to change somebody else's decision so that it interacts and then puts you on an alternate path that brings you to a reality where you experience the same thing that you created. So when thinking you're reacting to reality, you're creating reality. And what you're doing is going forward in time and backward in time and literally changing things that brings you to a new now moment that has then shifted your reality. So when you realize that, you become in control of your emotions because you don't want to do those things. You want positive vibrations, you don't want the negative vibrations. So the applicability is that you can create the present from the future. How are we doing on time? We okay? Okay, so now what a lot of people don't understand is that the future literally will create the present. And in this case, I visualize this book happening. We talked about channeling. We talked about the book. There is a future in which this book existed. It didn't exist in physical reality then, but it was me focusing on that future reality that literally cast its shadow back into the past, brought me down, that guided me down a path to where I took choices and actions and I followed that path to bring the book into reality. We create buildings, rocket ships, we create cultures, societies, and everything else. And what people don't realize that the inventions of today, books of today, Harry Potters of today, the movies, the epic people that wrote movie scripts and these epic books and everything else, all this magical stuff literally would come from a probable reality that we perceive as a future in which that actually exists and it is casting its energy back into the past. We perceive it and we follow that. And that is the guide that we follow to create these things and evolve our civilization,
Yes.
if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Just it was so fascinating before we get ready to sign off here. Um, like when I channeled that book last week, it was incredible how just instantaneously it hit because I have been working on being an open channel
And it's
and
there.
yeah, and dividing those barriers. And then all of a sudden it was like instantaneously, this whole book was in my mind and I just had it. Incredible.
Okay. But number one, you believed it was possible. So within
Right.
the boundaries of your own belief, it became possible. So number one, you had to believe it was possible, which opened the door for it to happen. Number two, you set your intention. Intention, as we say in the book, intentions literally direct consciousness. It is an inflection that is carried within the energy that directs consciousness. You set your intention to do so. So, within the boundaries of your own belief and with the intention, you set up the condition to open the door and it came to you. And all of a sudden, in one download, you get a big block of information that is, your little book that you wrote. And that's how Harry Potter happened. That's how Jonathan Livingston Seagull, I believe, is the name of the book.
Right.
Richard Bach that channeled that. All of these magical things. So all of the brilliant ideas, the inventions, creations, everything to drive society forward exists. We can tap into it via the soul and our, innate, natural, immortal connection to it.
So beautiful. As we wrap up today, our next podcast, I would love to dive more into your book if you're okay with that.
Mhm.
And before we get there, would you like to tell our viewers or our listeners where they could get a copy of your book?
Sure. They're available at tens of thousands of retail locations all over the world. They're on Amazon in all countries that I know of. They're on Barnes and Noble and everything else. But if you go to conscioushumanevolution.org, again, that's conscioushumanevolution.org, the name of our podcast for our nonprofit corporation, then most of the profits that all come back from that book are then going into the nonprofit to help us do more of what we do. So the big boys like Amazon and the others retain a lot more of the profits. Those that goes through our website come back to us to be able to help us reach more people, affect more people, touch more lives, and bring more love, light, the messages of Seth, of Christ, and the angels to all of humanity. And I would say that if you want to participate, if you want to be a part of this, you literally can be a part of this by sharing what we do. Now, everybody says like, share, and everything. That's wonderful when they're trying to grow a channel. These entities seek to reach as many people on the planet as they can in 43 languages and 209 countries in every form and way possible. They want to get the words out. It is the Seth entity, the Christ entity, and the angels that come to us, through us, and it is what we teach here at Conscious Human Evolution. So thank you very much for listening. We love
Thank
every
you.
single one of you, and we will see you soon on another podcast.
See you next time.
Bye.
This is how legends are made.